good morning, and we're back. This is Common Sense America. We just took a quick break, and we are bringing over to the show Leslie Corbly. She is a Young Voices contributor, and you guys all know how much I love our Young Voices contributors. And if you would go follow her on social media at Corbly Leslie, you can see it going along the bottom half of the screen. And so we would love for you to follow her. This morning, we are going to be talking about Daily Caller's article she wrote, an opinion article she wrote, just how blurry are the lines between social media and the government. So we have a lot to talk about. And as I welcome to the show, good morning, Leslie. It's nice to meet you. Welcome to Common Sense America.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I read your article and I was applauding you as I was reading through each paragraph. First and foremost, thank you for joining Common Sense America. I love Young Voices. I am just grateful to have you as a commentator and a contributor for them as a policy analyst. But let's get right down to the social media and the blurred lines with the government and private sector. Could you explain to our very conservative, faith-based audience, nationwide audience about your article? And then I will post it so I've already posted it for people to go ahead and read. But talk to us about the blurred lines that many of us are seeing on social media, and especially as it spiked during COVID.
Sure. So the article really tackles the issue of these blurred lines between social media and the government. So back in August, the New Civil Liberties Alliance, that's
Mhm,
NCLA,
mhm,
joined a lawsuit on behalf of two top epidemiologists
mhm.
in regard to the government monitoring and wanting a lot of control over what content regarding COVID was able
Right.
to be pushed out via social media, particularly platforms like Facebook and Twitter. So
Mhm,
they joined this lawsuit. It was already ongoing. It had initially been filed by the attorney generals of the states of Missouri and Louisiana.
mhm.
So it was
Right.
ongoing litigation even prior to August when this new Civil Liberties Alliance group joined on the
Mhm,
lawsuit. So documents that came out of that really showed how collaborative the relationship between these companies and the government is. And when I
mhm,
say the government, this encompasses several agencies from the CDC and the Health and Human Services to the
mhm,
White House and at times law enforcement agencies such
mhm,
as the FBI.
mhm. So let's talk about this more. So the general analysis, but let me ask you this: what do we do as we are seeing these blurred lines on our social media accounts? The censorship is a huge issue and our First Amendment rights. So what do we do as private citizens and say, hey, wait a second? Freedom of speech here. Why are you censoring what I'm saying? It's happened to me from a business standpoint and also a private standpoint. So I get on there and I talk about our health freedoms. I get on there and I talk about, you know what? I'm a pro-lifer. I'm going to talk about it till the cows come home. But what what are we supposed to do? Are we going to continue to watch other states file suit similar to what these two states have done, or are we as private citizens just going to have to sit here and be censored? What are your thoughts on that?
It's going to be a long. The solutions are going to take quite a while to emerge. So there's
Mhm,
several problems here. Two of which are very apparent, I think, to average people, and they're navigating it every day. The
mhm,
first is that the lines between public, private, and an interpersonal sense are blurred.
uh-huh.
Think things like work from home.
Yep,
What's your office versus what's your home?
yep,
Right, that's harder
yep,
to tell. What information are you sharing with just friends versus the public? So
yep,
think things like Facebook or other forms of social media where you
yep.
can limit who sees certain content, but the content itself is still less secure than if it were spoken in a house, right? So we
Right.
have a lot of blurred lines from public and
Yes.
private just in throughout all of the world in a way.
Right.
Like, again, this blurring lines between digital spaces and physical spaces is
Yeah.
part of what is bringing about these issues. So that's one piece of the puzzle that's not going to be going away anytime soon. And then the other piece of the puzzle is that it's increasingly difficult to tell what is public and private in an
Yes.
economic sense, right?
Yeah.
The government is increasingly regulating every part of the economy that it can get its hands on, and this is including on the technology front,
Hmm.
which is driving some of these problems because as is linked in the article I wrote, for instance, Cato put out a article, a
Yes.
really
I
good
saw that.
report on job owning, and that's part of this problem, which is that the extent to which social media companies are operating purely voluntarily is not really clear because the government has a lot of regulatory authority over these companies. So, what individuals can do, which I know I
Right.
just put a bunch of problems out there that no one individual is going
Yeah.
to solve. I know, I'm like, that's fantastic. But individuals can be very cognizant of what technological platforms they're using. And I think they should be very interested in what the not just the content moderation policies are, although that should certainly be on their minds, but also what data they are collecting, how
Mhm.
they're storing data. Those kind of questions are really important. So for just because it's what data they're collecting is going to govern what they have potentially to give over in a, let's say if it was a subpoena, um,
Mhm.
or some other reason that a government entity would have interest in obtaining information from that company, what they
Mhm.
collect. If they haven't collected that information, they can't fulfill a
Right.
potential request. Now, I know that's thinking much more long term, but
Sure.
asking what can people be looking for, and it would really be content moderation policies,
Yeah.
what information is being collected and how is it being stored.
Right, right. I want to read a part of your article. I just want to cite. So, this article came out at the end of October. So, really just about 2 weeks ago, if that, in the Daily Caller. And, again, it's a key lawsuit could reveal just how blurry the lines between social media and government have become. And so I wanted to read a couple paragraphs. You said the line between big tech's public and private functions are already blurred, like you just stated. Documents released from the NCLA lawsuit shows a disturbing pattern of collaboration between the tech giants and government agents. These documents, combined with broad regulatory power of federal government, show a trend of social media companies operating within government agencies as if they were collaborating with coworkers. That's very concerning. Just even you saying that. For example, as early as February 2020, Facebook was in constant communication with government agencies to assist in managing COVID messaging, including to control any misinformation surrounding the virus. Let me stop there for a second. That's very concerning. And obviously, we are here at Common Sense America. It's common sense to see that was happening. But my concern is those who didn't necessarily see that and who aren't as integrated like you and I as it comes to what's happening in the news headlines, knowing we're being either legacy media is lying to us or we're being told one thing and then we're just going to believe it without investigating it, without the critical thinking piece of no, this does not make sense. This is not sensible to do this. So I guess my question is, as we are heading into 2023, we saw midterms last week, we saw a shift, and we continue to hear things are going to be changing in 2023. Recession, money, everything. It's going to, as Biden said when he first got elected, or as Biden said as he first got elected, it's going to be a very dark, dark winter. And yeah, it is going to be a dark winter in the sense that they are, still trying to control the narrative. And people, really fell into a certain trap during that time period. So, as I'm just ranting to you in agreement with you on the Daily Caller article that you said, my question to you is, and not to put you on the spot, but as you have cited these examples that took place during the COVID piece, what next? What else are they going to be sending out misinformation to and kind of censoring? Is it going to be 2024? Is it going to be what's going to happen next year in this dark winter that they're calling for? What are your thoughts on that?
I certainly don't know what's coming next as far as specifics go, but I do think that there is reason for consumers to be concerned about the relationship that the government has to various corporate entities. In this case, it is Facebook, Twitter, those type of
Right,
technological platforms.
right,
So that's where I think that people need to keep their eyes open on these issues, be aware that depending on the corporate entity, they may be engaging in contact in direct contact with the government. So another example of this, because it's not just limited to Facebook and Twitter.
right.
As far as like how many companies are now widely collaborating or contracting with the government. So
Yes,
Ring is a really popular
yes.
uh, way to manage, sort of surveil your house for basic security purposes. They also have contracts with quite a few law enforcement agencies across the country. And so that's another thing consumers may or may not be aware of as it relates to these issues. Again, I think the big issue, a big takeaway for listeners should be to pay really close attention to what it is they're putting out there. Any data you don't control, and by that I mean is on your personal server or
Yeah.
something of that nature, is
Yeah.
is data that you don't have a lot of security in. So there's reason to pay attention to those kind of things, to what kind of information flows out or in. For so again, like you said, there are filters, so to speak,
Yes.
surrounding what comes in from your social media accounts. And so I would really encourage listeners to take a more active role in obtaining information, to be very questioning, and not to just believe what they read, regardless of the outlet, but to really, to the extent possible, go to original sources. So let's say you hear something that sounds really scandalous from across the country. If you can find article from a local newspaper, that's more likely to be accurate. If you
Yes.
can find verifiable information that comes from firsthand accounts, that's what you're looking for when you're making decisions.
Mhm.
Certainly, don't ever outsource your thinking to any media platform. It's
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not in your best interest.
No, most definitely not. No, and as you were saying that, I sit here and say it is, with you just even using the example of Ring, they are really infiltrating, trying to be as in control of what we're doing as possible. And I'll say it, you don't have to. I know you're sitting there from the Institute of Economic Research, but it just, the authoritarian messaging, the authoritarian mindset is definitely, it's infiltrating in some of these big tech, big media type situations. And that is very concerning, especially for we, the American people. We, the American people, are sitting here looking at, okay, what's going to be next on the table, on the kitchen table for us?
If you don't mind me jumping in as well, like really,
Oh, please
we need
do.
to think about how long this has been going on. We
Yes.
were willing to trade a good chunk of our security for safety, or our
Yeah.
privacy for safety, back
Yeah.
during not long after 9/11. So these
Yep.
issues have been metastasizing for some time,
Yes.
and the incentive of selling what essentially amounts to surveillance. Um, Services to government is only increasing with time because of the ability of technology to surveil in ways it couldn't before, right?
Mhm.
Facial recognition is a big area where you're going to see governments collaborating more with companies to identify potential suspects. Clearview AI is a prime example of this.
Yes.
They're one of the top companies in that sphere. So I think we really need to think of how this has occurred over a long period. And while it's going to be a bumpy ride towards any potential solution, we have to look at a long time frame. It's not
Mhm.
going to happen overnight. We slow walked into these issues over decades, and we're going to have to do a lot of grappling and figure out what it looks like to get out. On a note of optimism, though, I do think
Yes.
that there are some things your listeners should be aware of. Like, we talk a lot about, and by we I mean in conservative movements, there's a lot of
Yes.
talk about,
Yes.
the lack of strong communities, and I think that that's actually a note of encouragement. Is that as the areas in which the Constitution most guarantee you protection right now is going to be in those in community physical settings, right? Jurisprudence as it relates to how the digital is mixing in with the physical world is much less certain, because it's a completely new phenomenon. It's different across a lot of different dimensions, and
Mhm.
that makes it quite a bit more uncertain. But as it relates to gathering and doing other physically bound forms of community building, that is certainly secure, and I think should be very much encouraged.
Yeah, no, very much so. I was sitting here looking at your bio, and I wanted just to say to the audience of Common Sense America, I'm just so impressed by the fact that you are a privacy policy analyst with the Libertas Institute in Utah. Are you currently there right now? Is that where
Sure.
you
So
are?
I work with Libertas. That is my full-time job. I am finishing up a visiting fellowship with the American Institute for Economic Research. So that's what's behind me.
Right behind you. Yeah.
Not to be confused. I'm still with Libertas. Yes,
You are still with Libertas. Okay.
absolutely.
Gotcha. And then let me ask you this. What other, and I see that you are very focused on maintaining privacy in the cyber age, which is really impressive. What other things would you recommend to a common sense audience as we head into 2023 for them to kind of be really in tune about as it comes to our protection, especially with us being so glued to these, our teenagers being so
Sure.
glued to these, we are being so glued to it because we don't know whether to believe ABC News or Facebook, right? And I don't believe either one. But at the end of the day, what are your recommendations, and what do you have coming down the pike that we can be watching for as we follow you on your social media as well?
Sure. I would recommend really looking at the media landscape, like you just said, is not trusting any one source and being very aware of what is being written. The trustworthiness should, I think, at this point tie to authors rather than institutions. It is
Mhm.
very difficult to find media institutions that are worth their salt. So I would
Right.
definitely
It's
pay more
exactly true.
attention to individuals and what they're writing, and just be very aware as you're reading something, not taking it as gospel truth, being very critical in your awareness of, okay, this might tell me a piece of the story, but not all of it. So that would be some basics there. As far as the digital privacy end, I think moving to end-to-end encrypted applications for your email, that could be something like Proton Mail,
Okay.
or for messaging. Signal is great for messaging, is
Okay.
a way to protect yourself. I don't see a lot of value, frankly, in the legacy social media applications. I personally don't have any of them. I think Twitter is the only one I maintain for work,
Yeah.
but uh,
Yeah.
everyone can make their own decisions on that.
No,
Clearly,
you're right.
it's not an end all be all, but I think that particularly in light of what is coming out with these lawsuits, you do need to be aware that these technologies, or sorry, these companies, these tech companies, some of them are much more private in the sense that they have a more
Mhm.
contentious relationship to the government than others. So that's again where you can look at what application and what social media am I willing to work with, and how do they see their role in the private sphere.
Mhm.
They see their role as one that doesn't really have much to do with the government, or are they very willing to work with government agencies to manage content, right?
Mhm.
And that's just going to be an issue ongoing moving forward that I think consumers should absolutely pay attention to and should vote with their feet, and should just be aware of that. So I think that those are some interesting things to look at as far as making determinations about what you want your online life to look like. And then as
Yes.
far as information coming out from me, actually Libertas has launched a scholars network to study these issues. So feel free, please, to go to the Libertas website and look at some of the
Okay.
scholars who will be involved in studying the
Okay.
issues of privacy and self-governance as we continue forward into the 21st century. And then I'll actually be putting out here in the next, gosh, at least next several weeks,
Okay.
something that will be related to simple things you can do to become more private online. I mentioned some of those end-to-end encrypted applications, and I'll be writing up sort of some go-to tips for
Sure.
being secure in the 21st century.
I would love to have you back to talk about that. I think I have had situational awareness guests on our show before, and we're always having to be situationally aware as we are traveling, as we're flying, as we're, going from here, there, and everywhere. But are we being situationally aware online? And I think that is a great way for us to say, okay, you know what, Leslie, let's bring you back. Let's talk about our situational awareness aspect of being online and how can we be more protected from if we have to stay on Facebook, if we have to stay on all these social networks. I have to stay on all of these social networks to carry the show and to promote all the different work I'm doing. But do I want to? Not necessarily. I'm thankful that I can speak truth before they censor me, right? And I'm waiting for that day, knock on wood, dear God, please don't let them censor me. But you sit here and wonder about that. When's it gonna happen? On that note, I want to ask one final question and then we're gonna wrap for the hour. With Ring and that issue, are there other ways we can secure our home without having be subjected to the Ring itself and that company behind it and what they're doing? Are there other opportunities for
Oh,
protection?
absolutely. There are multiple opportunity or options out there for surveillance outside your
Okay.
home, or security systems that may not be as connected with law enforcement. So
Okay.
the important thing there, and this is again across the board as it relates to any product that connects to the internet or that has a component like that. Uh,
Mhm.
Oftentimes it's called the Internet of Things. Your thing
Yeah.
connecting up to the
Yeah.
internet. So that could be smart, like it's in this case, it would be your smart security. It
Yeah.
could be something smart that's connected to any other device. I believe refrigerators are now smart. So that's the
Yeah.
universe you're thinking of when you think of these smart devices. You want to oftentimes when you're the consumer, you're looking at an advertisement that just is showing you the benefits and that, makes sense. They're advertising what it would do on the consumer end. The problem with the privacy front on the privacy front is oftentimes it's the back end things that you need to worry about. So for instance, who controls the data, where is it stored?
Right.
So you're looking at those kind of issues as it relates to privacy. So when you look at a flashy new product that may very much make your life easier, one of the initial costs that should ping in your mind is,
Uh-huh.
okay, if this is a smart device, where's the data stored? Do I store the data? Am I in
Right.
control of the data? Right?
Right.
Because if it were stored on a local device, it becomes much more difficult then for there to be security issues with who can then obtain it or what happens with it. So
Right.
that's one thing to really look for. And again, it's that you can't really take anything at face value with these kind of issues. And there are absolutely options, plenty of old school options, even related to securing your home. Really, no need to necessarily have
Mhm.
a law enforcement component there where they can necessarily look at the footage from your home. Some
Right.
consumers won't mind that. Some would be completely fine with still working with Ring, but it's not something I think a lot of people are really thinking about
No,
on the front end of making these transactions.
just bring back old school. I'll be happy. I'll be happy with that. On that note, thank you, Leslie Corbly, commentator for Young Voices. Thank you for joining Common Sense America. I can't wait to get you back here and give me a heads up when you publish that article. I'd love
Thank
for
you.
us to really break that down again. Have a fabulous week. Many blessings to you, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining.
you.
All right. Bye bye.